There are a lot of topics that I want to talk about, and there are a lot of knives that I want to review. But I recently got back a couple of Balisongs from my friend Bandage Knives, who offered to help tune some Balisongs. And I will say, this light is now lovely tuned. If you saw my review of this Donut Tachyon clone earlier, it had the worst tap ever, and it still taps, but I don't blame Bandage Knives at all. He honestly made this a miracle. The fact that it's only this much tap compared to what was uh amount of play. So I will focus on these two knives and tolerances and tune and all these things. Like, I will admit I'm not a machinist, I'm not an expert, but I will say some of the things that I have observed. I don't have a rep here. Should have gotten a rep ahead of time. But I also, thankfully, recently got back my HR Rich from Garvit. It just took way too fucking long. And this is a knife that taps. What is tap? Tap is when the blade, if you shake it, hits the channel, or sandwich. But if you shake it, the blade can hit the sides here. Blade rub is if it's even worse, the play basically. Actually, I should back up. Play is basically how much movement up and down this can do, like this, because obviously it's on these pivots, but how much play there is up and down. How much play can affect how well it flips. It's theoretically a knife with bad tolerances and bad play can still be a good flipper, but the better tuned it is, the more nice it feels. Longer knives and knives with very thick spines have a higher chance of tapping. Basically, every rep taps. And a lot of reps also blade rub, where if you have worse enough tolerances, the blade will literally scrape against the inside channel like it's a pair of scissors. So we know about Machine Wise having really, really good tolerances. Basically, there's a lot of things that can be done, such as a surface grind here. A lot of people know about bushings. Bushings are the small steel discs inside the pivots, and they're held by washers. So oversized bushings will have play. Thankfully, this actually doesn't really have a lot of play since my friend tuned it for me. But if a bushings is oversized, you'll get an amount of play. Even if your bushings are tuned, there are still factors that can cause play. Also, bushings are a pain in the ass in the sense that, like, while bushings is a really great system, it takes a lot to tune a bushing. And if you undersize a bushing, you get binding. Binding being that you don't get free handle swing. So if a Balisong doesn't have free handle swing, it's worse, arguably, because then you're just not able to flip it as smoothly as possible. What are other things that affect tolerances? I think I've already made a video that kind of talked about some of these things, but I will get basically into these two knives and why they're a little odd. The size of the washers can be a factor. A lot of the imperfections of machining. So the more accurate the machining, the more precise it is, the better it will be. So when I sent in a few knives to Bandage to help me out here. But basically, this is the Notion Flip Serve. The Notion Flip Serve is quite expensive. You can watch my unboxing video about it. I will make a review at some point. But the thing about the Notion Flip Serve is that it doesn't have good tolerances, even now. And that is, once again, not Bandage's fault. It is innate to the knife. So at first, when he got it, it had a lot more play. The bushings were really oversized, and it's interesting because Notion Flips is a Polish maker, and he was like really confident in a lot of ways. And I was like, does it have a weight system? He's like, no, everyone really likes the weights, but a lot of people have had some frustrations with it. I know the person who sold it to me was Polish. So I'm like one of, I think, two people in America that have this. The other person being Old School Balisong, who has also had his fair share of gripes. He's tried to tune this. So asking Bandage Knives to tune this, he has tried a lot of things, and he wrote some things down. So one was the issue was that it had the wrong size washers. It used to be 0.02. It's now 0.03, which is a much more reliable tune. And it also had massively oversized bushings. But I guess there's just something innately off about this, because the thing is, there is an amount of play, and the blade does not currently tap, but it can if I loosen it too much. The other issue though is while a vertical handle swing is kind of a nice way to test things, a horizontal handle swing is a better way. So as you can see, let's see if I can show you like this. The bite handle is more or less fine. It's the safe handle that, here you go. As you can see, this is moving like this. The safe handle can vertically swing like this, but it has binding on a horizontal swing. Again, not Bandage's fault. I just want to make that super clear. He was super helpful, super great, and I am trying to give him money for that. He's like, no, don't. And I'm like, no, let me pay you. So the thing is, I think this is really fun. It's got a lot of weird issues, and it is an expensive Balisong. Originally $700, and now retails for close to $1,000, like 900-ish. And I think I negotiated pretty coolly for this, but they're a pretty penny. And unfortunately, for a pretty penny, these Balisongs, this Chanwich design doesn't have the best tolerances. He said he tried really hard to tune it. This is, I think, his first metal Balisong, but it's just quite expensive. If I do loosen it up, the binding might be gone, but then it taps, and I think I hate tap more. It's hard to say. And so the fact that there is both play and binding, it's possible that there's a rough surface grind on the pivots. If the surface grind here is uneven, then you're going to have uneven amounts of tolerances here. So the Rich has, like, I think pretty good handle swing here. Like, this is a Balisong that has good handle swing, but can tap. It's unfortunate, and theoretically, maybe if I use stainless steel washers, maybe if I used, because then they have less give, and you know the distance between the slabs and the pivot region is like a fixed distance that won't crush with the phosphor bronze, but it's hard to say. There's just a lot of things that it could be. Now, the Titan is also fascinating. I lent this Titan to Ted Flips, and Ted Flips has, I think, bought and sold 3 different Titans, trying to get one as good as this one. This Titan is really good. It's really nice, and part of why it's really nice is because I had a second Titan that I wanted to do a handle swap on, only to realize that this is a shiny finish and the other one was a matte finish, and the other one just had a better tune, so I cannibalized the good parts. I also really like how these spacers look. They have a little gold flex on the bottom. But speaking of the spacers, it's really hard to get a good tune on the Titan, and part of why is that something that I think is unique to the Titan is that the pivots taper outward with these spacers. Now, theoretically, if we were to shave the spacers width down here, sorry, I should do it over here. If we were to make this less tall, theoretically, you could get a perfect tune. But normally, Balisongs taper from the width of the from the pivots down to the spacers, but this tapers this way, which is bad, I guess. So I will say that on one hand, Bite Blades left and did one more run, and unfortunately the run was apparently the tune is not as good. Titans are really fun. There's still a little bit of play, and Bandage was like, hey, this is why it doesn't work. And I said, oh shit, well, and actually, also, here's the thing. If you do have a Titan, and you are not married to these spacers, which I kind of am. I like these acrylic spacers. I actually like how far out they stick. I like the balance of it. But if you don't like the balance of it, and more importantly, if you don't like the fact that this happens, Zippy has spacers that actually make sense. I believe that they are flushed with the bottom. I don't know if he has spacers that extend past, but Zippy spacers literally fix a vast majority of the problem. There is still a chance that the surface grind is not very smooth. This blade is D2. It is possible to rust. I have thought about possibly trying to get it coated. I don't know. I think the Titan is legitimately one of my favorite trainers, if not my favorite. Well, it's not my favorite aluminum trainer, but it's one of them. And despite its weird dimensions, I'm going to leave it as is. Maybe someday I will attempt to sand down this, but right now, honestly, I think I will just rather not disassemble the knife. So there's that. I also know that some people have had issues with Cygnuses. Cygnuses have 4 sets of screws. A video that was originally in like the highlights of LDY was of Telestro. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember. It's Telesto or Telestro? Telestro the person opposed to Telesto the knife. Telestro, Ty, was saying something about the tune, but he learned, I think, and I don't know why it's no longer pinned, that basically you want to unscrew all of the screws a little bit, so they're all a little loose, and then you tighten from the pivots down to the Zens, down to the small screw, and then down to the big one. And make sure that you're not tightening so hard that you crack the G10, because that's very possible. The more screws you have, the more tune factors that you have. This tune is pretty fucking good. There's like a teeny amount of play, but it's very, very reasonable. And so like part of it is the blade and whether or not the surface grind is legit. Part of it is the bushings, the easiest, fastest thing that people can kind of attribute to, not the easiest or fastest really, but is the bushings, which can be tuned. So sometimes if a knife normally has very good tolerances, but then another knife of the same make has worse tolerances, could just be the bushings being oversized, but you just have to make sure that you don't undersize them. And then there are other things like how many sets of screws there are. If it's channel, you're usually only going to have 1 set of screws in the body, maybe another set of screws for the Zens, and the Zens can also to an extent affect the tune, but it's mostly at the pivots. And if it is a sandwich knife, well, now you have even more factors. You have your spacers, you have more screws. There's just a lot of things, and a modular knife like the Rep comes with so much issues. There's actually I don't remember who did it. I think it's FFF. There's the Fat Kit, which makes the Rep much thicker. Just it is a thicker Balisong, but now you don't have tap because the channel is just wider. The longer the blade again, and the thicker the spine, the more chance there is for tap. But I did want to just bring up some points of some odd tuning issues, particularly with the Titan and the serve. And despite the serve having, well, frankly, it has issues that I can't fix, and even a professional knife maker couldn't conveniently fix. Like, I don't know if there's anything that can salvage this to make this worth that much money. It's worth that much money because they're rare. There's, I think, only like 7 or 8 of them total, and they are really cool. And I will do a full review of the serve, and I will talk about some of the tune issues, but I can also just refer to this video. But I wanted to just talk about some of the issues that you often see with tune. And so yeah, it's pretty typical, at least for bushing knives. Oh, I will go into washer knives and bearings. 1, bearing knives should have rock steady tune. If they don't, something is horribly wrong. 2, washer knives are annoying to tune because if you disassemble it, getting that perfect balance between handle swing and binding is a pain. So you want handle swing, but you don't want tap, but you don't want binding. It's part of a nightmare. It's part of why I hate washer only knives. But that's more or less the only real systems for Balisongs. A lot of people I remember were most folders are with bearings, and so there's like almost no play at all with these. But yeah, that's just a factor. Since Balisongs have they have 2 sets of pivots that involve many actions and many motions that it can put into. There's a lot of demand for good tune. So yeah, anyways, it's not just bushings. I hope that this was at least interesting. It's not necessarily, it was mostly just an excuse for me to talk about these 2 knives and their weird tune issues, but yeah, hopefully some of you found it helpful. Give it a like, subscribe, click the bell. It's yeah, it's a hot day. Stay hydrated. I'm gonna do that right now. Oh, and donate to the coffee if you want, I guess.